The quantum display flickered to life in the subterranean command center beneath the Andes, casting Dr. Elena Rodriguez's face in an ethereal blue light. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces, tracking the approaching Zornak fleet with a precision that betrayed years of meticulous preparation. "Incoming transmission," announced a young technician, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Elena's eyes narrowed. The Zornak flagship, a massive crystalline structure that defied traditional spacecraft design, dominated the holographic display. Its surface rippled with intricate energy patterns, technology so advanced it would make most species tremble in submission. But not humanity. The communication channel crackled to life, and Ambassador Krultax materialized, a towering figure of iridescent exoskeleton and biomechanical augmentations. His voice resonated with the supreme confidence of a species that had conquered hundreds of worlds. "Inhabitants of the third planet," Krultax began, his translator rendering his clicks and chirps into a cold, methodical human language. "The Zornak Imperial Confederation extends an opportunity for peaceful integration. Your civilization has been assessed and found suitable for assimilation." A subtle smirk played across Elena's lips. Suitable was exactly what the Zornak were meant to believe. Behind her, a global network of specialists from every continent watched and waited. In a converted research station beneath the Antarctic ice, Dr. Kwame Osei reviewed last-minute calibrations on quantum entanglement systems. Off the coast of Japan, a fleet of seemingly obsolete fishing vessels concealed next-generation adaptive camouflage technologies. In the favelas of Sao Paulo, underground engineering collectives had been preparing modular weapon systems that could reconfigure faster than any known scanning technology could track. The preparation had been decades in the making, a global effort so secretive that even most world governments remained unaware of its full scope. Krultax continued his ultimatum, listing the generous terms of integration. Each word was a calculated demonstration of imperial arrogance, each gesture a testament to the Zornak belief in their absolute technological superiority. What they didn't know was that every transmission, every scan, every moment of observation was precisely choreographed. "We require your immediate submission," Krultax concluded. "Resistance is mathematically improbable. Your technological capabilities are primitive." Elena whispered to herself, her finger hovering over a hidden quantum encryption key. The holographic displays around her began to shift. What the Zornak sensors were seeing was carefully constructed misinformation, a technological Potemkin village designed to lull the invaders into a false sense of security. Satellite networks that appeared rudimentary were actually quantum-encrypted nodes capable of processing information at speeds that would make the Zornak's most advanced systems look like abacuses. In orbit, what seemed to be aging communication satellites were actually the first line of a multi-layered defense system. Each appeared to be a relic of early 21st century technology, but their internal systems were a labyrinth of adaptive AI and quantum computational matrices. "Transmission accepted," the young technician reported, her voice carrying a hint of suppressed excitement. Elena nodded. The trap was set. The Zornak believed they were looking at a young, fractured species, technologically infantile, politically divided, ripe for conquest. They saw exactly what humanity wanted them to see: weakness. But weakness, Elena knew, was often the most sophisticated form of camouflage. As Krultax's transmission concluded, she activated the first phase of their response. Quantum encryption keys began to dance across global networks, a silent symphony of preparation that would remain invisible until the moment of absolute necessity. "Let them come," Elena murmured, watching the alien fleets approach. "Let them believe they know everything about us." The first move was humanity's, and the Zornak wouldn't realize it until it was far too late. The first Zornak strike wave descended upon the Pacific Rim with surgical precision. Massive crystalline vessels cut through the atmosphere, their energy signatures promising total annihilation. Captain Jiro Nakamura watched from the bridge of the JSS Yamato, a vessel that looked like a retrofitted research ship, but was anything but ordinary. "Targeting systems are online," announced Lieutenant Aria Chen, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe and pulse with living intelligence. "Adaptive camouflage at 98% efficiency." What the Zornak didn't understand was that humanity's defense was never about matching alien technology point for point. It was about something far more dangerous: radical adaptation. In the depths of the Pacific, a network of underwater quantum computing centers came to life. Each facility was a marvel of distributed intelligence, not a centralized system that could be easily targeted, but a living, breathing ecosystem of computational nodes that could reconfigure faster than any known scanning technology could track. Commander Rafael Santos watched from a hidden base in the Brazilian Amazon as the first wave of alien ships began their assault. The initial attack was brutal. Energy weapons that could vaporize entire city blocks, plasma-based bombardment that turned landscapes into glass. To any outside observer, it would have seemed like a hopeless massacre. But Santos knew better. Each blast, each energy signature was being mapped, analyzed, and understood in real time. The underwater quantum networks were doing more than just defending. They were learning. Every Zornak weapon discharge was a lecture, every attack a data point in humanity's rapid technological evolution. Initiating Countermeasure Alpha, Santos murmured into his encrypted comlink. Across the globe, seemingly random systems began to activate. An old communications satellite over the Indian Ocean, a weather monitoring station in the Siberian tundra, a deep-sea research vessel off the coast of Antarctica. To the Zornak, these would appear as isolated, ineffectual responses. In reality, they were nodes in a global neural network of unprecedented complexity. Aboard the lead Zornak vessel, High Tactician Pornax watched the initial assault with growing confusion. Their intelligence suggested a swift, total victory. The human defenses should have been overwhelmed within minutes. Instead, something impossible was happening. Their most advanced targeting systems were experiencing quantum interference. Energy weapons that should have obliterated entire city blocks were being redirected, their devastating potential somehow diffused. It was as if the very fabric of reality was resisting their assault. Impossible. Vornax clicked to his second-in-command. Their defensive capabilities exceed all predictive models. What the Zornak didn't realize was that humanity's defense was a living, breathing entity. Each defensive action was not just a reaction, but a learning process. Nanotechnology integrated into the very infrastructure of cities began to reconfigure. Buildings weren't just structures. They were adaptive systems that could redistribute energy, redirect attacks, even generate localized quantum interference fields. In the skies above Tokyo, Captain Nakamura's ship performed maneuvers that defied conventional physics. What appeared to be evasive actions were actually carefully calculated data-gathering operations. Each movement collected information about Zornak weapon systems, energy signatures, and computational methodologies. "They're trying to understand our pattern," Lieutenant Chen observed, her augmented neural interface parsing terabytes of data per second. "But we don't have a pattern. We have potential." Deep beneath the ends, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the global defense unfold like a complex chess match. This wasn't just a military engagement, it was a philosophical confrontation. The Zornak believed in rigid, predictable systems. Humanity's strength lay in its capacity for radical, unexpected adaptation. A message came through her quantum-encrypted channel. It was brief, from a resistance group in occupied territories. Initial conversion protocols successful. Enemy systems beginning to destabilize. The true battle wasn't happening in the skies or on the ground. It was happening in the fundamental understanding of what intelligence and adaptation could mean. The Zornak had come expecting to find a primitive species ready for conquest. Instead, they were confronting something they could not comprehend, a technological ecosystem that was less a defense and more a living, evolving organism. and they had no idea how much danger they were truly in. The first transmission came through an unexpected channel, a children's educational podcast about marine biology. Dr. Marcus Chen leaned back in his chair, watching the complex algorithm unfold. The communication team he led was unlike any psychological warfare unit in human history. They weren't just spreading information, they were weaponizing narrative itself. In a converted data center beneath the streets of Singapore, an international team of linguists, psychologists, cultural anthropologists, and quantum communication specialists worked in perfect synchronization. Their battlefield was consciousness itself, a terrain far more complex than any physical space the Zornak could comprehend. The Marine Biology podcast contained precisely encoded quantum information. To human listeners, it was an innocent discussion about coral reef ecosystems. To the Zornak communication networks, it was a cascading logic bomb that would take days to fully unravel. "Target acquisition complete," murmured Aisha Okonkwo, a linguistic cryptographer whose neural implants allowed her to process multiple communication streams simultaneously. Her Nigerian grandmother's stories of resistance against colonial powers had inspired her life's work, understanding how narratives could be more powerful than weapons. The Zornak communication network was a marvel of technological integration. Every piece of information was cross-referenced, analyzed, and contextualized instantaneously. They believed this made them invulnerable. They were wrong. Humanity's psychological warfare was a fractal attack. Each layer of misinformation contained multiple layers of truth, each narrative a nested Russian doll of meaning that would take weeks, possibly months to fully decode. On a seemingly abandoned research station in Greenland, a team led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the initial responses. The Zornak communication network was beginning to show signs of cognitive stress. Their rigid information processing systems were encountering something they had never faced before, a form of communication that was simultaneously literal and metaphorical, factual and allegorical. The Marine Biology podcast was just the first wave. Global communication networks began to shift. Social media platforms, academic journals, entertainment channels, all became conduits for a carefully orchestrated psychological operation. Each piece of content was a precision-crafted weapon designed to exploit the Zornak's fundamental psychological vulnerabilities. In their culture, information was absolute, binary, true or false. Humanity introduced them to the terrifying concept of quantum information states, where something could be simultaneously true and false, where meaning could be fluid and contextual. A documentary about Antarctic research stations contained embedded quantum encryption that would slowly rewrite communication protocols in the Zornak's monitoring systems. A series of children's animation shows introduced narrative patterns that would create cognitive dissonance in their intelligence-gathering algorithms. "They're trying to understand us through their existing frameworks," Dr. Chen observed, "and we're systematically demonstrating that those frameworks are fundamentally inadequate." The psychological attack was multilayered. It wasn't just about spreading misinformation. It was about demonstrating the inherent limitations of the Zornak's cognitive models. Vornax, the lead Zornak tactician, began to experience something unprecedented in his species' history: uncertainty. The information streams from Earth were becoming increasingly difficult to categorize. What should have been simple intelligence reports were turning into complex, almost philosophical puzzles. Their most advanced translation and interpretation algorithms were failing, not because the information was encrypted, but because it existed in a state of perpetual contextual flux. A children's story about a shape-shifting sea creature contained more strategic information than their most advanced intelligence reports. A seemingly random collection of academic papers about marine ecosystems was actually a distributed communication network that could reconfigure its own meaning based on how it was observed. The Zornak were facing an enemy that didn't just resist their invasion, an enemy that was fundamentally rewriting the rules of communication, perception, and understanding. "We are introducing them to the concept of human imagination," Dr. Chen said quietly, watching the complex information cascades. And imagination is the most dangerous weapon we possess. The war had moved beyond physical battlefields. It was now a conflict of consciousness, and humanity was just getting started. The occupation zones became laboratories of human ingenuity. In the favelas of Sao Paulo, Rosa Oliveira's workshop was a testament to human adaptability. What looked like a cluttered garage was actually a precision engineering hub where captured Zornak technology was systematically dismantled, understood, and transformed. It's not about copying, Rosa explained to a group of young engineers huddled around a partially dissected alien communication module. It's about understanding the fundamental principles and then reimagining them entirely. Her team represented a microcosm of global resistance, a Brazilian-Japanese programmer, a Kenyan quantum physicist, an indigenous Australian materials specialist. Each brought a unique perspective to the challenge of technological adaptation. Thousands of kilometers away, in the mountain research stations of Nepal, Dr. Karma Sherpa directed a different kind of resistance. His team specialized in biomimetic engineering, drawing inspiration from the most resilient ecosystems on the planet. The Zornak saw occupation. Sherpa saw an opportunity to demonstrate the most fundamental human trait, the ability to thrive under impossible conditions. The Zornak patrol drone swept overhead, its advanced sensors scanning the seemingly primitive mountain terrain. What it detected was a landscape that appeared untouched. What it couldn't comprehend was the network of adaptive camouflage systems that were literally growing from the mountain itself. Biomimetic response protocol activated. Sherpa murmured, watching as the landscape itself began to shift and adapt. The mountain research station was more than a research facility. It was a living, breathing example of humanity's core strength, the ability to learn, adapt, and transform. In the urban centers of occupied territories, resistance took a different form. Communication networks that appeared disrupted were actually sophisticated underground systems. Street art became a language of resistance, each mural containing quantum-encrypted messages. Graffiti was no longer just art. It was a distributed communication network that could reconfigure itself faster than the Zornak could decode. Major General Aisha Okonkwo received reports from these resistance cells through a network so complex that even she didn't fully understand its entire structure. That was by design. No single point of failure could compromise the entire system. The Zornak believed they understood occupation. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, subjugated countless civilizations. They approached Earth with the confidence of a predator that had never encountered true prey. They were wrong. Every piece of captured technology became a learning opportunity. A discarded communication module in a Brazilian favela would be completely reimagined in a Nepalese mountain research station. An energy weapon component discovered in the Australian outback would be studied by engineers in the Arctic Circle. The resistance was a living, breathing organism, decentralized, adaptive, impossible to predict. In the abandoned subway systems of New York, another group of resistance fighters worked on something the Zornak would never expect. They weren't just fighting, they were building an entirely new paradigm of technological interaction. It's not about winning the war, explained Dr. Elena Rodriguez during a rare encrypted communication with the resistance cells. It's about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to existence. The Zornak saw technology as a tool of control. Humanity was showing them that technology could be a form of communication, of understanding, of growth. Each resistance cell operated with a level of autonomy that would have seemed chaotic to the hierarchical Zornak. But there was a deeper logic at play, a distributed intelligence that emerged from seemingly random interactions. A drone component captured in Brazil would be studied, reimagined, and its principles applied to a completely different problem in Nepal. A communication module would inspire a new approach to ecological restoration in the Australian outback. The occupation was transforming humanity, not through destruction, but through an unprecedented level of collaborative innovation. Vornax, the lead Zornak tactician, received increasingly disturbing reports. These weren't typical occupation zones. These were living laboratories of transformation, where every limitation was seen as an opportunity for radical reimagination. The Zornak had come to conquer. Humanity was teaching them something far more dangerous: how to truly evolve. The diplomatic chamber gleamed with an artificial perfection that masked its true nature. Ambassador Sofia Alvarez stood at the center, a holographic representation of calm diplomacy that concealed a far more complex reality. Her neural implant, invisible to the Zornak delegation, was processing information at speeds that would make their most advanced quantum computers seem like primitive calculators. Each word, each gesture was a carefully choreographed performance, a dance of information warfare that transcended traditional diplomatic engagement. The Zornak diplomatic team consisted of 3 representatives. Krelax, the primary negotiator, towered over Alvarez, a biomechanical marvel of genetic optimization and technological augmentation. His species viewed diplomacy as a precise mathematical equation, where every interaction could be reduced to calculated probabilities. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. "We appreciate the opportunity for dialogue," Alvarez began, her voice modulated to trigger specific neurological responses in the alien listeners. Each syllable was a carefully constructed quantum signal, embedding layers of information that would take their communication analysts weeks to fully decode. The chamber itself was a marvel of human engineering. What appeared to be a simple diplomatic meeting room was actually a complex quantum information processing center. The walls, the floor, even the air itself was part of an intricate communication network that could reconfigure its informational properties faster than the Zornak could comprehend. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from a remote monitoring station, his team of linguistic cryptographers and quantum communication specialists tracking every microscopic detail of the interaction. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting. It was a carefully constructed information weapon. "Your proposition requires careful consideration," Krelax responded, his translator rendering his complex biological communication into human language. What he didn't realize was that the translation process itself was a vector for additional information transfer. Sofia Alvarez smiled, a smile that was simultaneously an apology, a threat, and a complex mathematical algorithm. The diplomatic team behind her represented a cross-section of human potential that the Zornak could never understand. A quantum physicist from Mumbai sat next to a cultural anthropologist from Sao Paulo. A neural network specialist from Nigeria exchanged subtle glances with a biomimetic engineer from New Zealand. Each brought a unique perspective that defied the Zornak's rigid understanding of specialization. "We're prepared to discuss the terms of our potential cooperation," Alvarez continued, her words a carefully constructed maze of potential meanings. What the Zornak saw was a standard diplomatic negotiation. What was actually happening was a multi-layered information transfer that would fundamentally challenge their entire conceptual framework. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the interaction from a hidden quantum communication hub. The diplomatic meeting was just the visible surface of a much deeper operation. Every word, every gesture was part of a complex algorithm designed to infiltrate and understand the Zornak's communication infrastructure. The negotiation room itself was alive with potential. Quantum entangled particles danced between the human and Zornak representatives, carrying information that existed in multiple states simultaneously. The very fabric of reality was being subtly manipulated. Krelax began to feel something unprecedented in his species' diplomatic history: uncertainty. The human representatives didn't just present information. They embodied it. They transformed it. Each interaction was a living, breathing entity that refused to be constrained by traditional communication models. "We propose a collaborative framework," Alvarez said, her words triggering a cascade of quantum information processes that would take the Zornak months to fully unravel. What appeared to be a simple diplomatic proposal was actually a comprehensive systems infiltration. The Zornak believed they were engaging in a negotiation. In reality, they were walking into an information ecosystem that would fundamentally challenge their understanding of communication, cooperation, and existence. The diplomatic meeting was transforming from a potential peace negotiation into something far more profound, a collision of fundamentally different ways of understanding reality itself. And humanity was just getting started. The first sign of humanity's true capabilities came not with a thunderous attack, but with a whisper of impossible synchronization. Major General Aisha Okonkwo stood in the Global Coordination Center, a facility that looked more like an organic ecosystem than a traditional military command hub. Holographic displays shifted and breathed, each node representing a different aspect of the global resistance. But these weren't just displays. They were living networks of human potential. Initiating convergence protocol, she murmured. Around the world, seemingly unconnected events began to align with a precision that defied conventional understanding. A solar research station in Chile adjusted its quantum sensors. A deep-sea exploration vehicle off the coast of Japan recalibrated its communication arrays. An agricultural drone in the African Sahel modified its tracking algorithms. To an outside observer, these would appear as random, unrelated adjustments. To the Zornak monitoring systems, they would be incomprehensible. In reality, it was a global neural network coming alive. Vornax watched in mounting confusion as the human response defied every predictive model. Their attacks weren't linear. They weren't even truly attacks in the conventional sense. It was as if the entire planet was a single, breathing organism capable of instantaneous, distributed response. The Zornak had conquered worlds by understanding their enemies' weaknesses. Humanity presented them with something entirely different, a system of such complex adaptability that it bordered on the living. Dr. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the operation from a quantum communication hub that seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Her team wasn't just coordinating a counteroffensive. They were demonstrating an entirely new paradigm of collective action. "We're not fighting," she explained to her core team. "We're communicating in a language they can't understand." Each resistance cell, each research station, each seemingly isolated community was a node in a global neural network. They weren't just sharing information. They were creating a form of distributed intelligence that evolved faster than any traditional computational system could track. In the mountains of Nepal, Dr. Karma Sherpa's team used biomimetic principles to create adaptive camouflage systems that could reconfigure faster than the Zornak scanning technologies. In the favelas of Sao Paulo, Rosa Oliveira's engineering collectives were turning captured alien technology into something entirely new, not just weapons, but communication devices that could transmit information through quantum entanglement. The attack, if it could be called that, was a symphony of impossible synchronization. Zornak weapon systems began to experience cascading failures, not through direct interference, but through a form of distributed cognitive dissonance. Their targeting systems would lock onto a target, only to find the information shifting, transforming, becoming something else entirely. Major General Okonkwo watched as the global network began to pulse with a rhythm that was both mathematical and organic. It was a demonstration of human potential that went beyond traditional military strategy. This was a form of resistance that was simultaneously defensive and creative. "We're rewriting the fundamental understanding of conflict," she said quietly. The Zornak had come expecting a conventional war. Instead, they found themselves confronting a living, breathing system of collective intelligence that could adapt faster than they could comprehend. Quantum communication networks began to shift. Information flows that appeared random to the alien monitoring systems were actually carrying complex, multilayered messages. A weather pattern in the Pacific became a communication channel. The migration patterns of marine life transformed into a distributed computing network. Vornax received reports that made no sense. Weapon systems that should have been operational were experiencing quantum interference. Communication networks were becoming impossible to track. It was as if the very fabric of reality was resisting their invasion. The human response wasn't just a counterattack. It was a fundamental reimagining of what conflict could mean. Each resistance cell, Each research station became a node in a global neural network that could reconfigure itself faster than the Zornak could understand. They weren't just fighting. They were demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to existence, one where collaboration, adaptation, and collective intelligence were the primary modes of interaction. The Zornak had come to conquer. Humanity was teaching them something far more dangerous: how to truly evolve. The final confrontation wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a moment of profound transformation. Deep within the quantum communication hub, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched as the intricate networks of human resistance converged. What appeared to be a chaotic collection of resistance cells was actually a living, breathing system of unprecedented complexity. High Tactician Vornax received the order to launch what he believed would be the decisive strike. The Zornak had concentrated their entire remaining fleet, a massive armada that had crushed civilizations across hundreds of star systems. Their weapon was a quantum cascade generator, a device capable of unraveling the molecular structure of entire planetary systems. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The first sign of trouble came when their most advanced sensor arrays began to experience quantum entanglement. Information streams became impossible to parse. Communication networks started to fold in on themselves, creating impossible recursive loops that defied all known physical laws. In the favelas of Sao Paulo, Rosa Oliveira's engineering collective had been working on something the Zornak could never comprehend. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a communication protocol, a way of transmitting information that was simultaneously a message, a defense system, and a form of collective intelligence. Dr. Karma Sherpa's team and the Nepalese research stations had been studying the fundamental principles of adaptive systems. They had looked beyond traditional technological approaches, drawing inspiration from the most resilient ecosystems on the planet. Mycological networks, neural communication in complex biological systems, quantum entanglement in living organisms, all became source material for a fundamentally new approach to conflict. Major General Aisha Okonkwo coordinated the final phase from a distributed command center that existed simultaneously in multiple locations. It wasn't a centralized system that could be targeted. It was a living network of human potential. The Zornak fleet approached Earth, their quantum cascade generator primed to unleash total destruction. Their sensors showed a planet that appeared defenseless. No concentrated military responses. No traditional defensive formations. What they saw was a lie. As the first wave of their attack began, something impossible happened. The very fabric of reality around their fleet began to shift. Quantum communication networks that had been carefully prepared over months began to activate. Each resistance cell, each research station, each seemingly isolated community became a node in a global neural network. The attack wasn't stopped, it was transformed. Quantum entanglement protocols developed by a team in Mumbai began to redirect the cascade generator's energy. A communication algorithm designed by a group of linguists in Sao Paulo began to rewrite the fundamental communication protocols of the Zornak fleet. Biomimetic adaptive systems from the Nepalese research stations began to interface with the alien technology in ways that defied conventional understanding. Vornax watched in mounting horror as his fleet's most advanced systems began to experience total systemic failure. It wasn't a traditional attack. It was a fundamental reimagining of what conflict could mean. The quantum cascade generator, their most devastating weapon, began to turn in on itself. Energy streams that were meant to destroy entire planetary systems were being redirected, transformed, turned into something entirely different. Dr. Rodriguez understood what was happening on a level that went beyond traditional military strategy. This wasn't just a defense. It was a communication, a demonstration of a fundamentally different approach to existence. The Zornak fleet began to experience total systemic collapse, not through destruction, but through a form of technological communication so complex that it bordered on a living system. Their most advanced computational systems were being rewritten, transformed, turned into something entirely new. In the final moments, something unprecedented happened. The quantum communication networks that humanity had developed began to interface with the Zornak technological systems. It wasn't an invasion. It was an invitation to a different way of understanding reality. Vornax realized, in the last moments before total system failure, that humanity had done something far more dangerous than defeat them. They had demonstrated a way of existing that the Zornak could never have anticipated. The fleet didn't explode. It transformed. And humanity was just beginning to understand its own potential. In the final moments, the surviving Zornak leadership is brought before a human diplomatic team that represents a united Earth. Instead of seeking revenge, humanity delivers a message that will echo through the galaxy. They demonstrate that they could have completely destroyed the Zornak civilization, but chose not to. The warning is clear. Humanity is not just a species to be conquered, but a force of adaptive, creative potential that can transform any challenge into an opportunity. The few remaining Zornak are left to rebuild, haunted by the realization that their greatest weapon, their assumed technological superiority, was their ultimate weakness.